Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access is recording. Is anyone else here recording this meeting? Okay, we'll begin with the pledge of allegiance. Mark, would you please lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we begin with the Desi's.
Okay, yes.
Oh, yes, sorry. What's that?
Desi has done more than just giving us feedback to the questions we've asked. The first email in your packet is from Michelle Griffin. I had asked her if she could share with us the email that she'd gotten from the Secretary of State regarding the statement about making sure that it's clear on the ballot and to candidates that the terms don't begin immediately. So this is a quote from the email. Quote, as for when a term of office begins under Chapter 41, Section 107, we've seen municipalities seek special legislation to provide for other specific terms of office. However, we think that since Chapter 71, Section 14B allows for the agreement to provide for the term of office as long as the term is clear in the agreement and approved by the towns, it could vary from the day after the election. It would need to be made clear to the candidates and on the ballot. And so it's based on that last sentence of that email that this is the guidance that all districts are getting that are working on their agreement.
Okay.
As I said, we got a little bit more than that though.
Do what you want, Tom.
She will, I clerk will.
Last month, we received notice from Interim Commissioner Tutwiler that he was proposing amendments to the regulations for regional school districts to the Board of Education. And based on the timeline they laid out, it's likely that those amendments will go into effect before the fall town meeting. So if you actually look on the back of my email to Michelle, my response is like, thank you. And so how are these new regulations going to affect our agreement? She hasn't gotten back to me with her analysis on that yet, but I have looked through the regulations and I've prepared this. These are my best guesses of things that will need to change. You know, anticipating that the regulations go into effect as they're currently proposed, which they usually are. And so I just have this memo, which I will go through. Let's sort of quickly get through this. But the attachments to my memo are the memo from Interim Commissioner Tutwiler to the Board of Education, and then the proposed new amendments. And I also included the most current version of our agreement in the packet for your reference, because I'll be talking about those as I go through. So, this is
Is this the same one?
I need two by accident?
That's all right, no, it's okay, I just want to make sure.
in the
It's the same one.
current regulations, there are 7 sections. In the new proposed regulations, there are 9 sections. I went through sort of section by section in my memo. So first, they're changing some definitions in section 01. I don't think that will have any impact on our agreement. The definition changes are minor. In section 2, in reorganization procedures, that I would anticipate will cause us to have to change section 4A of our agreement to include new elements that are added to the end of the regulation. So if you look in the regulations on page 6,
Which, on the agreement, on the proposed agreement,
it's
with the yellow on it, or?
it's going to be page 8 of our agreement and page 6 of the regulations.
It's like the goalpost keeps moving.
So the reason I'm expecting that there may need to be some changes is that there's a whole new paragraph, actually two whole new paragraphs that have to do with what happens if there is a, if there's a reorganization, which would be if you're adding a town or eliminating a town, which in our case would be terminating the agreement. So there are these two new paragraphs of procedures. I expect that's going to have some impact on our agreement. Basically, the new procedures talk about doing the long-range planning, going to the commissioner with the draft of your agreement, and then getting approval for the draft of the agreement before you share that with your towns. On section 4B, there are some changes made to regulation section 03 that I think will probably have an impact.
4B.
4B is on pages 8 and goes on to 9. Just a continuation of that. This has to do with the withdrawal of towns.
Sean, the regional agreement?
Oh, I'm sorry,
On
thank you.
the regional agreement?
Yeah, on the regional
Oh.
agreement.
And so, if you
Oh,
look at new language that is in section 3 of the agreement, again, there are additional new paragraphs that are being added.
what page are we on?
Page is that on 7?
Page 7 of the
Of the
regulations?
regulations, correct. On page 8 and 9 of our agreement. So there are new paragraphs that talk about when a member town seeks to withdraw and thus terminate the agreement, prior to doing that, they must submit a long-term education plan and obtain approval of the appropriating authorities, member towns, and the commissioner. We have some language like that that's similar, but this sort of just lays out the order. Basically, our current agreement says that if a member town wishes to withdraw, they need to contact the Department of Education and ask for the convening of a regional group to discuss long-range plan. In the new regulations, it's actually incumbent on the town, as I read this, to submit a long-term educational plan and obtain approval of that before moving on to the next step, going to withdrawal. Also,
How often does that happen? How often do withdrawals occur?
I'm known of 2 in my
Only
career
2,
as a
yeah.
superintendent. Very, very rare. In section 4, same section of this, but moving on to page 9, there's some language in the proposed regulation that talks about proposed amendments being submitted to the department for review prior to submission to local appropriating authorities in the town. So, we talk about the process for amending the agreement, but the new regulations, if adopted, would say before you can bring your proposed changes to your towns, you need to get approval from the Department of Education. So we've been working with the Department of Education. It wouldn't necessarily be a change of practice, but it would make that a definite requirement. Section 41.04, this is, which in your regulations booklet begins on page 9. This is not really a lot of substantive change to language, but I do think just reading through it, it clarified, in my mind, a question we've had around municipal representation for the regional school district for collective bargaining. And so the process that this describes, which is actually, I think, essentially the process that should be in effect now, is that 21 days, or no less than 21 days before collective bargaining begins, the superintendent sends notice to both towns that we're going to be entering into collective bargaining. Then there needs to be a meeting of the two towns. It's the chief executive officer or the chairperson of the select board of both towns, or designee. And together, they select the person who's going to represent the towns in negotiations. If they don't agree, then the commissioner picks someone.
Oh, fun.
Commissioner. These guys are way out of bounds.
First of all, why do they care who's in the negotiating committee?
Yeah.
We could just say Joe Schmo's in the negotiating committee, he's representing us.
I don't think they
No.
care.
This guy's representing this teachers' union, and that's all there is to it.
So the
I don't think
commissioner
they
just
care.
says this is the law, and it's the law, that there's no one that has to vote on this or something like that? We
The
don't
Board
get a
of
say in that?
Education votes on it,
So Desi votes on the rules that Desi wants to make?
correct. Well, the laws are implemented by the legislature, the
Right.
regulations are promulgated by the department.
Yeah, this is not a law.
Right, it's
It's
a,
a regulation.
It's a regulation.
So it would have the force of it.
Regulations do
Right.
carry the weight of law, though,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
correct.
All right.
So you
is
can
that-
no longer just alternate and choose, you
So-
have to.
So we
like,
get
for
it,
meeting.
we create a committee to pick the guy
Yeah.
to be on the
And
committee.
then the commissioner decides. And then the commissioner
No,
decides.
no, no, the commissioner only decides
I
if the
understand,
committee
I'm
can't decide.
jesting, I'm jesting. This is, they justify their jobs with this.
All right.
Okay,
Well,
So, wait, under this here, and again, I'm
Where's
just
Eli
getting
when you
this
need him?
now, I didn't get a chance to review this
Sure.
as much before, but each town will have its own representatives?
no,
They-
it's one
they
representative,
Everyone
decide,
together,
yeah.
they will decide.
Yeah.
right.
So now you currently, they just alternate,
Right,
so, and then
We
each
got
town,
That's no longer works.
correct.
unless you guys.
I mean, you could still do that
Yeah.
if your
If we agree
successors
on it,
agree to keep
both
doing that,
towns.
keep
Yeah.
doing that.
You have to
No,
have a meeting to say that you're
Right.
going to do that.
Right, correct.
It's absurd.
Okay,
and I assume that's a posted meeting and all this.
In case I forget to post it. Then we-
well, I'm not sure, and that's a good question, because the meeting that selects the person is done by the chief executive officer or chairperson or
Oh,
designee from each of the
it's
towns, so it's
not-
not gonna be a quorum in either town. So that's a good question, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll be a long time by then. Okay.
wait, and then it says here, municipal representatives shall have one vote in all regional school committee deliberations on collective bargaining matters.
Oh, so that's another vote, so now we're gonna have 8. So you'll have 8 members in the committee when it comes to voting on
to
collective bargaining
ratify the
matters.
contract.
So they're gonna have to come to every executive session and,
Yeah.
Don't they now do that?
No, about the school.
Not-
no,
the school
when the
committee.
school committee meets to talk about what was done in the committee,
They don't, they can, they have,
They haven't,
yeah,
but they don't normally.
yeah.
they're not interested in coming at 9.
They still need to.
So, I know,
In the municipal representative term as a participant in the regional school committee's collective bargaining shall be the same length as the term of office of an elected member of the regional school committee, unless a shorter term is agreed to by the executive officers of the member cities and towns at the time.
Why do you have left for another
That's-
3 years?
Yeah.
I believe that's because lots of times agreements are all up at once. So, I mean, you could be negotiating all the time, and instead of doing this process every time, you could just say, for the next 2 years, 3 years, this is gonna be our person. So, I know that Mike in particular had some questions about this, I'll follow up with him, but if you see him first, feel free to share my memo and this regulation. I think it lays it out pretty clearly how it's supposed to work. Next, 4105 is regional school district budgets. They're adding the word transportation.
Expenditures, yeah.
So I think we probably just need to add that. We have a whole other section that says transportation is part of the operating budget, but probably got to add that in this section as well.
That's part of the operating budget.
Correct,
So we're already doing it.
correct, we are doing
We
it.
just don't break it out.
Well, We do break it out, but we actually have it in a different section. There's a list of things that are supposed to be put into your budget, so I think just add that to the list. I don't think the section on excess and deficiency funds will have an impact on the agreement. I don't think the section of fiscal control, which is proposed to be changed to fiscal oversight for regional districts by the commissioner, would have a change in our agreement. You're gonna like this one, Mark. Section 4108 is a new section. I can't predict what it's gonna do.
Where's
It
41?
says,
Let me get there before I.
okay. No, I mean, I seriously
What
think
page
you're
is
gonna
this
like
on?
it.
41 of all cats way down.
It's 23.
Yeah, all right.
It says, if a school committee wishes to request an exemption from following any of these regulations, it may take a vote directing the superintendent to ask the commissioner, and the commissioner can waive the regulation.
Oh, good.
So, that's interesting.
With no buy-in from the towns or no. That's good. That makes sense.
The last section is.
Extraordinary circumstances, and only to the extent allowed by law.
Okay. Section 4109 is another new regulation. It's a severability clause. It only applies to the regulation itself, so I don't think it will impact the agreement. It basically says, if something in the regulation is determined to be unlawful, it doesn't mean all the regulations are unlawful. So, when I hear back from Michelle on what do we have to change, we'll see how close my guesses came. But I would advise, not really going too far forward until we hear from them, what happens with the regulations as well.
When do you think you'll hear from them? I mean, I asked that because, we're gonna schedule a town meeting and people gotta know what it's about, and we gotta do some education and some outreach and.
I would
You think
expect.
you can't go in there and say, well, that's what we told you, but guess what?
Right. I mean, I would expect that I'll probably hear from her shortly, and I think we'll have a hypothetical conversation. But I think she's gonna be forced to say, well, I can't advise you to change anything right now because the board hasn't voted on these yet. I don't know whether these are gonna go into effect.
Okay.
So, that's my report for
Now,
tonight.
what about, so, this is an hypothetical. What about regional committees that aren't changing their regional agreement? I mean, do they have to change it to fit this, or they go along their merry way until,
Yes, until they wanna make a change.
so if there's a 30-year agreement, and they can do it the old way for 30 years?
No, I don't think there's any timeline on the agreement.
No, they don't do it?
There's no timeline on the agreement.
Revision.
Yeah, okay.
But if you wanna revise a word, you gotta go through this whole process.
So, may I ask, and I'm looking quickly and I don't see it. So it says the final action by the Board of Education anticipated September of 2025. When will these go into effect? At the time that it has been ratified? Or is it like, it will start in 2026, July 1st or something like that? I mean,
It depends on their vote, but they could make them effective immediately.
but it has nothing written in here what the, like, are they being asked to do it effective immediately, or
I don't know.
can you find that out so that, because it keep changing this, and then by the time we get to the town meeting and we let the information out, and then we get it approved, or we're gonna get it approved, then suddenly it's like, we're
Yeah.
changing it again.
I can ask. I will say one complication maybe is that we'll also have a new commissioner in September, so,
What if he doesn't like this?
They'll do it again.
If any lucky,
They'll do it again.
That's what I mean. So this is fun.
Shoot the messenger, but I get it.
Mhm.
I got a lot of reading to do here.
Right. Do either of our select board members have any anything that they'd like to share from any of your meetings or discussions with your boards regarding the regional agreement?
We've communicated to the Wilbraham Select Board that we don't see that further further discussion of this would be productive. Based on a few things. One of them being is that they don't consider the former study as relevant, even though they just spent $400,000 for remediating the mold. They don't think that that study's relevant. I think it's important to point out that in that study, those recommendations were made not only for if it was a combined middle school, but also if it continued just as a separate middle school. The other issue that we had is that the recent study, the recent assessment of the building, select board chair said that the town, that the state had signed off on the condition of the building. In fact, the matter is the state didn't sign off on the condition of the building. All they did was talk about the air quality test. They said it currently didn't have mold, but they also said that 50% of the classrooms had a higher CO2 level than they should have. And they also made 31 recommendations to fix the ventilation, air conditioning, which could prevent further mold intrusion in the future. And then the other issue we have is the school system became a region in 1993, so there's no question about that. The school was closed, so our students had no other choice but to go to Wilbraham Middle School because they weren't getting the proper, the programs, stuff that was needed because of the attendance there. So if you don't believe that prior existing conditions are relevant, if you believe that the state signed off on the condition of the building, and there's no point in discussing it. So we think that the school committee should, if they want to make that a regional, say it's a regional school, we'll take it to the voters and see what the voters say. If they say yes, then it's an 80-20 split. If they say no, and the other thing to remember is that the building still is owned by the town of Wilbraham, and it's their responsibility to take care of that building. So that's where we are. Their position is it should be a regional school, and our students are there, and only to be fair, we should pay 20% of the cost. Right?
Not exactly. So the position of the Wilbraham Select Board is we thought we began to have a framework in place by allowing for any cost Wilbraham might incur to have some sort of depreciation value. And we thought that was the beginning of the framework. Apparently Hamden felt differently. They sent us a letter saying they felt the further discussions would be unproductive. We were open to further discussions, and I'll just leave it at that.
Would it be appropriate for me to ask a question?
No, go ahead.
When you say the framework, do you mean the sort of outline of how costs might be dealt with that was developed by the Hamden Town Manager?
It was developed, yeah, I think it was more developed by Craig Rivers. He's the one who proposed it.
Okay.
And Don can speak to it better because I'm not that familiar with it, but he's the one who suggested it at a meeting. We then got some information from the town manager. I think we hadn't worked out the details around that, but I think that framework began to make sense to the Wilbraham Select Board.
But that framework was based on doing something about not making us responsible for the pre-existing condition. future.
I didn't take that from, I didn't take that from that meeting, but
We're
that's,
gonna
again,
talk about, that we use the term carve-outs, and I thought it was a bad word, the term should have been pre-existing conditions. I mean, I think it's important to note that the air quality study that was done in January made the same recommendations that this 2015 study said, that you gotta fix those unit vents, and that, they don't work, they're inoperable. Some of them were repaired, not using the proper parts. I mean, that's what they,
and so to Don's point, I think, and that's where the more work was gonna be needed, because Wilbraham's position is,
not relevant.
no.
Well, that's what your chairperson said. She said in the newspaper too, that it wasn't relevant. And who's gonna
Well,
put
but-
millions of dollars into an old building?
Wilbraham's position was that, Hamden would have an equal vote at town meeting to accept any sort of improvement to the school, and would have an equal vote as to what Wilbraham had. And therefore, if they chose not to move, if they felt it was not in their best interest to make those improvements, they just vote no. And that effectively,
You raised the question at our last.
I'm not gonna debate the issue, Dan, I'm just gonna tell you how what the discussion was, so I'm not gonna.
And I just wanna say that the last meeting we had, you raised the issue that you were concerned that if it became a regional school, that the region would be able to, I think your word was, force these things forward. So what you really wanted to do was have what you really wanted to do was have a veto power over whether it got to the town meeting before it got there for the people to vote on.
Well, I don't have it around the regional school, I do have an issue around that, because I'm worried that things will make to the warrant that don't have proper funding and things like that. So I don't, but it isn't specifically around the Wilbraham Middle School, it's a larger issue I have around that. But I mean, so that's effectively where we are, so I think there's a gap, and we were open to having further discussions to try to close that gap, and apparently we're not going to.
So let me just so I can get clarification, okay? Let's pick something that's on the, give me one item that's on the list that you would like as a carve-out.
The units, fixing
The
the
units, okay,
ventilation.
okay, the ventilation, right? So, we go forward, we move forward with the agreement, both towns accept it, and then they say, okay, or the school committee talks to you and says, listen, we gotta fix these vents, right? You both agree, yes, we gotta fix these vents. Goes to town meeting, Hamden says, well, hey, listen, those vents should have been fixed long ago, they weren't fixed, we turn it down, there's no vents fixing. Not good for the students, not good for anybody, right? Okay, there's no way that Wilbraham could then go and decide, hey, you know what, we really gotta fix those vents, we're gonna fix those vents. Just as if Wilbraham turns it down, there's no way that you could say, okay, we're gonna pay the full cost for those vents.
Right, correct. But I would suggest that if the towns vote for the agreement, to change
Right.
the agreement and make it a regional school,
Mhm.
they will realize at that point, any capital expenditures are gonna be shared based on the student population, just like we do at Minichog.
So when you're buying a house, right, you go in and you go, oh, the septic tank's no good, right? So Title IX, right? Septic tank's no, 5, thank you. So Title 5, thank you, ladies. So okay, the septic tank is gonna cost $10,000, you know, we take that out of the purchase price of that, right? That's logical, or the seller of that property could say, well, I can get it done for less.
The more appropriate analogy would be, you're renting a house, and the landlord, you go in the house.
But you're not renting, you're not paying any rent.
Nor are you buying.
But we're not buying,
Right.
we're.
They're
you
being
own it, so you're the
allowed
land-
they're being,
you're- Wilbraham is the landlord, so we're tenants.
So my cousin Tommy, who actually went to Minichog for a year, he bought a house, right? He has a house with his wife, and his mother and stepfather live in the basement. And they have paid to renovate the basement to make it a beautiful living space for them. They're not paying any rent, but they're like, hey, listen, we are doing this as a way of, you know, making it good for us to live there, and at the same time, it's helping the homeowners, because it increases the value of the property, yet, you know, they're paying for those renovations. So that seems like a win-win-win, and their family and we're family. So is there any kind of logic that way that could help sell this? Like, there is no rent being paid, so do we want to start charging a rent? But then we don't want to charge to do that.
Well, the rent,
Is
the
these,
rent we're paying is 20% of the total.
Right, 20%.
operation cost of the.
but they gotta pay 80%, and I'm telling you, Wilbraham is not like stepping up here to say, hey, listen, we're gonna do $10 million worth of renovations, which would cost you, bad math, roughly $2 million, right? But that's not what they're saying, is that when things come up, your rent would be 20% of those things. Yes, some things could have and should have been done in the past,
But we don't wanna pay for things that should have been taken care of.
so you don't wanna pay rent.
We don't wanna pay for things that should have been taken care of 10 years ago.
Right, so really, in the basement that my cousin owns, it's like they should have done a lot of work in there in the past and they didn't. So,
But they did, and they didn't charge you.
no, I'm just saying that they live there and that's their view of rent, is that they have,
Maybe succinctly said, anything that would be improved upon the building would not only benefit the Wilbraham students, but would also benefit the Hamden students.
right,
And so we think it's a reasonable thing to ask that those costs be shared.
I'm gonna throw something out there, just as an idea, and again, the spitball, because we've seen it in impasse, so I'm throwing anything out there to see if it would stick. What if instead of 20%, what if it was 10%? What if it was a different percentage than
It
the
is a different
20%?
percentage based on the enrollment. It varies all the time, and who knows
What
that
if
would
it
be.
was even different? You need more, not based on enrollment, based on certain things.
I don't know if you can do that under the law, right?
Well, we can do anything at this point, we just gotta agree with it.
I-
Then we could have someone tell us we can't do it. Let's get an agreement on something and let
I-
someone
I
tell us we
think-
can't do it.
So that's kind of where the Wilbraham Select Board is. We're open to further discussions to see if we can try to close this gap to make some sense of it.
Don, do you think that would, if it's a possibility, again, I'm spitballing here, just trying to move past on the
Well,
impasse. Do you think that if instead of it being 20%, it was lower percentage, would that make that something that,
I'll be honest, that would be a hard thing to sell to the Wilbraham Board.
well, let's just see let's see what that number is. I mean, would that be something?
I don't know, I'd have to talk to my board, you know,
Okay. Could maybe you have that conversation and see if it's a, you know, I'm not saying 10%, but maybe it is, whatever, and then you can negotiate on that percentage, and then maybe we can get past this to better, it'll help Wilbraham because it'll take off X amount of percentage of a cost that they now have to pay 100% of, right? And at the same time, there is no rent being paid by Hamden, so this would be a goodwill gesture saying at a smaller percentage, we'd be more willing to do something like that. And it's for all of our children. And our children will be living in both towns in the future, hopefully.
so bring it to my other board member, we only have two.
I heard about that, yeah.
So,
I like Craig very much. Does anyone else have any ideas, or does that give anyone else a brainstorm, or?
This agreement has to go to both town meetings, correct?
Yeah.
So if we put in the agreement that the middle school is gonna become a regional school,
Right.
and both towns vote in favor of it, it's done. If one town doesn't vote,
It's done.
we're back at the
fails.
drawing board, right?
Right,
Well, we're at where we're at today.
Okay.
Okay.
so what we're
But
trying to
all
do,
this other stuff is gone too.
Everything's fine. Yeah.
the stumbling block is that percentage, and maybe if they did some math and they said, okay.
You're making a big assumption there.
The stumbling block is not the percentage, the stumbling block is, you know, why are we paying?
Pre-existing conditions.
Pre-existing conditions, right? But at the same time, you know, we could say, no rent has been paid, right, or $1 a year has been paid by the district, right? So no rent has been paid because they're all of our students, but I'm just trying to look to see if there is some kind of way that we can meet, that everyone at this table can say, you know what, that is a compromise.
I think the compromise was in the fact that if in fact Camden pays for a repair
Yeah,
and the school is closed in the near future,
right?
that Camden would be reimbursed for their capital expense with some sort of depreciation.
In much the same way that.
That was the compromise I thought Wilbraham was
Okay.
open to.
And-
When I say Wilbraham, meaning the select board.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
And why didn't that work for you?
That was proposed by them. That was proposed by Hamden.
With carve-outs,
With carve-outs,
with carve-outs.
I don't recall the carve-out function.
yeah.
The carve-outs is an issue for Wilbraham, I know that.
Correct, and I think that was part of
That was part of
the
it.
discussion,
That was
so,
part of
I
the,
mean,
we
I
have the
think that's-
carve-out, we have certain carve-outs,
Uh-huh,
and then in the future, any investment we make, you know, because there's a little work that needs to be done there,
Right.
there will be work that needs to be done there in the future, that we would have, and instead of, let's say we put $200,000 into the school closed in 8 years,
right,
then we would get, you know,
Percentage
20%.
back.
Okay. Yeah.
and the carve-outs were based on the feasibility study of 2015
right.
or
So
16.
let's say.
And not everyone.
Follow me on this.
Not everyone, not
There's
everyone.
just certain ones that
Let
were.
me respond to that. So right now, you're saying the carve-outs are the ventilation system.
Ventilations and the
Okay,
doors.
let's talk about ventilation system right now. Wilbraham has to pay 100% for the ventilation system. Wilbraham says, okay, you know what? We're not gonna pay anything, we're not gonna do any ventilation system.
We already said that.
Okay, great, okay.
Your
Now-
capital planning committee already said that.
Hang on, in year 2, in year 3, now we have a mold problem.
Don,
Wait, hang on.
no,
We have- we have-
I need
wait,
to
wait,
address
just-
that.
Wait, hang on, just let me finish and then you can, then please, trust me. Then in 2 or 3 years, now we have another mold problem. And it costs another $400,000 to fix this mold problem. And then another couple of years after that, we have another mold problem and it's another $400,000, right? Wouldn't putting that ventilation system basically be a really good investment that you don't have to pay, you know, 20% of $400,000 every few years? I mean, seriously, if you're looking at it for the health of the student and for the health of the building where your students are spending a lot of their time,
Yes, it would be. a good investment.
it's 20% is what they're looking at, and that they did, in theory, agree to, like, hey, if something happens with the school, we give it back, whatever, we will return this money to you. Like, but remember, like, we had these bleachers out here, right? And 9 years ago, we didn't replace them, but we have spent more money than it cost to replace them over these 9 years, just to keep those things running active. It would have been smarter for all parties if we had replaced them 9 years ago. It would have been cheaper in the long run, right? So I'm just saying, I understand in principle what you're saying, but at the end of the day, it gives you power when you say, okay, listen, we will pay 20%, because then Wilbraham goes, oh, wow, there's a percentage that's being paid by someone else. It's worth it for us to do it, because now suddenly, instead of it being a $100,000 project, it's now an $80,000 project, right? And then that fix will prevent problems from happening down the line. And again, if the building's sold or something like that, reimbursements will be made, which I think is great. Can you help me? Like, what's the problem with that logic?
I think it's not about, no one is disputing that, well, it's my understanding that Hamden is not disputing the fact that the events have to be replaced,
Mhm.
repaired, whatever work needs to be done.
Right?
It's the fact that it was documented in the feasibility study of 2016, saying that it needed to be done at that time for it to become a regional school district, or to remain as a middle school with that inhabits students. So I think it's just more about the deferred maintenance that's then caused a larger issue. And yes, it affects all of the students, but I think that's just, it's that piece of, that it was documented, it was relayed that there were these certain things that did have to be taken care of 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Whether it remained an independent, you know, just a Wilbraham school, or it became a community.
Right, and that it wasn't done, and now here we are 10 years later, saying, having the same discussions, which this happens, right? Again, with the bleachers, so many things, having the same conversation, saying, hey, we need to do this, but now we want you to kick in because now your students are there. But it was something that should have been done. And I think that's the point of contention. I think that this conversation, I appreciate what you're saying. I don't know that we can solve this, but I think it's just a matter of the two boards, you know, they have to compromise,
what if
or
we
that we
came
just
up-
have to vote and
Right, no,
figure out how it's
let's
gonna
take that a
work.
step further, let's take everything that we just said a step further, I'm sorry, Mark. What if we did something where we came up with a plan, a 5-year plan of renovations that have to be done, and both towns will vote on them each year, and these are the plans, these are the changes that we wanna
Well, you
happen
have that, right?
at the school, and that we create it for this school, and both towns say, okay, yes, we will put this to be voted by our townspeople, and have that in as a 5-year plan to get the school up to the percentage, so then there will not be any future problems and stuff like that. Like, instead of it just not being ever addressed, it will be addressed.
And then I think the next piece of that is that they
Is
were
that a-
having conversations, and then, you know, you have one board that's saying, we don't think these conversations are productive, and then you have another board that's saying, we thought we were making some headway, and, you know, kind of.
Right. So that's
They're
where we
having a
come in to
conversation,
hopefully
so I
help
think
them on.
that's-
Actually, let Mark say his piece. Thank you, Mark, for deferring your statement.
So we make it sound like the capital planning committee, I've had a conversation with the chair of the capital planning, Wilbraham, just randomly chose not to repair the units this past year.
And
It's not accurate.
it is not.
When they were asked, during the meeting, the committee asked the schools if it would fix the problem. And the answer was roughly, we hope so. We hope so is not a fix. We're not gonna spend $750,000 hoping it fixes something. And so it was rejected. It wasn't rejected because of Hamden maybe coming on board and we can force the cost to them, or no, Don, let me finish. It wasn't rejected out of hand for any other reason than that. And we have to budget for these things, especially at those costs. And when it comes up fairly late into the process, it's difficult to handle a cost of that nature. But when we bring forward a $750,000 cost, we need to ensure the fix is going to fix the problem, or the proposed fix is going to fix the problem.
Dr. Slaughter gave a very impassioned description of what needed to be done. He was asked, is this a priority? He said, yes, it's a definite priority. He was asked, would it fix the problem? He said, we hope it would go a long way to it,
That's right.
okay?
Not very definitive.
And then, at the time of one of the capital planning board members brought up the issue of the possible regionalization. The question the chairperson asked was, did that mean that Hamden would have to pay a part of it? And the answer was exactly. When it came time for the vote, he said, we could pass on this for 2 reasons. Number one, the cost, we're not quite sure of the cost, and number two, the potential of regionalization. So, it was a definite.
Oh, right, yes.
The reality is this, and I'll speak on behalf of the board.
The reality is that when you spend $400,000, which by the way, the town of Wilbraham's going to end up having to pay, not the school district, because of your lease, you should take a look at it. When you spend $400,000 for mold remediation, when you have a feasibility study that says the vent system has to be fixed anyhow, because if 50% of the classrooms have too much carbon dioxide in them, and then you have the state air quality people come in, school, can say, you need to fix the vent, number one recommendation, here's 31 recommendations, but number one, you need to fix it. When you have the superintendent, deputy superintendent of schools come and say, this is a priority, we gotta get this done, then it takes a little more consideration than just saying, we don't like the number, and maybe family will pay part of it. with the regionalization agreement. So,
Thank you for your advice. The reality is, I think, and I said it earlier, and I'll say it again, any capital improvements that are made to the building will benefit both Wilbraham students and Hamden students. It seems like it should, those costs should be borne. If we were building a new school, we wouldn't build a new school in the back of Wilbraham for the benefit of Hamden. And renovating a school is much the same, however you want to frame it.
and I can't get a direct explanation why, when you spent $10,000 for a study, and the study said you need to do this, whether it becomes a combined middle school or not, none of that was done. If you're concerned about the students, it wasn't done 10 years ago.
So
That was my question. In 2016, the school committee and the towns were told there's a problem with the quality of the air in the buildings. Did that proposal go before the capital planning committee in 2016?
I don't know that.
You know, somebody's fallen down on this.
So,
The same way we're in a tight space in the middle school. Somebody wasn't paying attention. But what bothers me is affecting the health and safety of every person, little or adult, that lives in that building. So one way or the other, we have to fix it.
Exactly.
And it should be shared because you're sharing the school.
I think the school district commissioned the study we're referring to, although I don't know that. So, I believe it was. Not that, I don't know if that matters, but I think it was a school committee, it was a school district.
Hamden Wilbraham Regional School District existing conditions and feasibility studies.
It was a school, so it wasn't the town. And I lost my train of thought.
Middle school.
So, anyway, we're going round and round, I'm not sure we're making any product,
We're talking.
yeah, I'm not sure we are talking, we're talking at each other, not with each other.
Well, we can't seem to come to an agreement, but I believe that if we
We're open to further discussion,
If we
Tim,
went
that's
to
all
a
I can
town
say.
meeting and said, for issues that concern the health and safety
No.
of the people who are living and working in that building, the towns will share by their percentages. And if we went before both towns and said, look, your children are living in a building where whatever percent of the rooms have too much CO2, which is not healthy for anybody, we need to fix this, and we want your help in doing it. I don't see the town voting it down. This is about health and safety of their children.
I'm quite willing to go to a town meeting and say that.
I think it'll be difficult to get through town meeting unless, the leadership of the town stands behind it.
Right.
What do you think they
Can
would?
I throw out another
Could
idea?
they agree, let's ask the towns. Let's just put it to the towns. We got this problem, we've known about it since 2016.
We are open to the regional agreement as it's currently constructed. But it basically says we're gonna share in the expenses.
Yeah.
I think Hamden is having, and I don't wanna speak for Hamden, but I think they're having a problem with, that's where the carve-outs come in. They would prefer to see some level of carve-out.
Okay.
For lack of a better term.
Okay, I got an idea, all right? No, seriously. We keep it at 20%, right? But let's take those carve-outs, okay? And let's put those carve-outs right here. This is what we're gonna do right away. We get a loan to do all of the carve-outs all at once, all right? And then we figure out a percentage that each town will pay, you know, on those carve-outs, on the loan over the life of the.
Well, the bonding is 20% also, right?
Yes, if the school district does it.
If the school
And
district does it.
It wouldn't be a school district expense because it's a town-owned building.
Right. So it would be, Hamden and Wilbraham together would come together and say, we're getting a loan for these 5 things, that we're gonna get these all right up to speed, and then we're gonna start now on a 20%, and then we can work, what would that percentage be that the town would pay on what they consider pre-existing
And you're gonna do
conditions
this
and
with
stuff
debt
like that.
exclusion?
I just spitballing and
No,
throwing
I'm
this out
with
on
you,
the
but
table right
where does
now.
this fit into the budget?
Right.
Where does
Yeah.
this loan fit into the budget?
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
It would have to be a debt exclusion. If it's a, I mean, how long can you go on a loan on a building like this? From
20 years, isn't it? I don't know, like 20, 30 years, I think, I don't know, depending on what.
So
it
if we
is.
did a 20-year, a 20-year loan, right, with both towns together?
20-year, let's call it what it is, a 20-year debt exclusion, because it's gotta fit in the budget.
20-year debt exclusion.
You just can't
Yeah.
take a loan without a way to fund it.
Understood. A 20-year debt exclusion, 10-year debt exclusion, we're talking a few $1 million, whatever it would cost to get everything
A few?
up the speed.
I mean, I think there's, I don't know what's in there, I don't know what the costs are, but I don't think they're just, I don't think it's like an insignificant amount of money.
No,
I don't think so.
I think $1 million is a lot of money, folks, so I'm
Oh,
not
I-
saying that
I
anything's
assure you.
significant.
It's well over.
Yeah, I assure you, it's well over that.
Just trying to come up with something that you guys can agree
plan.
with. If we took the issues that you have.
I don't
and
think
we
the
put it
school can
there-
take a debt exclusion on the middle school. They don't,
No,
School
the
can't. It
towns,
would have
well,
to
you
be
could,
the
'cause
town.
I think you could, probably,
Well, if you
because
made it a
you
regional
lease it,
building.
right? You have a 20, 30-year lease, so you
Right,
probably could.
But that is, over $30,000 or $60,000, whatever the trigger point is,
And
in the lease.
Why couldn't you take a debt exclusion on that?
Because by the lease, it's not the school's cost.
They couldn't be, the town could.
Right.
But that would be, we could pay the cost all ourselves, I understand that, that's where the sore spot occurs.
The question I'd have with Sean's scenario, and I really don't know the answer to this, is could you get a debt exclusion for a property in someone else's community?
Well, what you potentially could do is
Right.
regionalize the school and then do the debt exclusion.
right,
Could do that.
right?
Again, I'm not sure debt exclusion passes either town. So, I mean, that's a whole different can of worms.
But why don't we start putting the numbers together, like what numbers are we looking at?
Well, you guys have the capital repairs.
No, I know, but what things do Hamden consider pre-existing conditions? And then negotiate what that comes down to and what's that number? That if these things were done in the building, Hamden would be okay at going to, at 20%, roughly 20% based on the student population moving forward.
Why do we need to, why would Hamden do that if they're not willing to share the capital cost of
Exactly.
Again,
capital cost?
because
It's the same thing, you're just calling it, it's half empty or half full, whichever
No,
way you wanna call it.
it's a guarantee that these things will be done and are being done and getting the school up to 100%. And it doesn't have to be 20%, 80%, it could be a different percentage. As part of their considered rent or something for the past 10 years or whatever.
So you wanna charge them more? You wanna charge Hamden more than Wilbraham, for the rent?
You guys can, I'm just saying, guys, I'm trying to come up
I'm
with
with you.
with something here, you can mock me for it, which
I'm
is
not
fine,
mocking you,
but at
I'm
the
not
same
mocking
time,
you.
It just may be perceived
we
as
have
the
two
same.
adults here that say, no, we can't do anything, we're not gonna negotiate anymore. We
That's
have all
not,
these
that's
kids
not what we
sitting here
said.
waiting,
That's
like,
not
what's
what we,
going on?
that's not what Wilbraham said. Wilbraham's open to further negotiations. So don't
So I'm
punch
trying-
into that,
I
we're
know.
cutting off negotiations, we're cutting off discussions.
I'm trying to get this, I was told that discussions had stopped at the
They
beginning of
have,
this
they
meeting.
have.
So I'm just trying to, let's come up with
I
something.
mean, it takes two to have a discussion,
It does.
so.
So you can keep us posted if you decide to come together.
Well, I'll have to think about
Okay. All right, so we will
it.
move
Keep
on.
working with Desi. You're doing a great job.
All right, does anyone have anything else? Okay, we don't have a, so next meeting scheduled.
We had that placeholder for, I believe, May 27th.
Okay, so we will hold on that because
Okay.
if there's no additional information from Desi, then I don't know that it's necessary for us to
We got
meet.
a selectors meeting that night
On
too.
Tuesday, okay.
So,
We have an equity walk at 3:15.
Right.
May
Plenty of
27th.
time.
so it's
May
unlikely
20
that they'll get back to you before the holiday.
Probably
Again.
not.
Right, so, so it's unlikely that we're meeting again in 2 weeks, so, just, we will keep you notified, or we'll reach out to find a date that works for everybody.
Actually, 2 weeks, that's 1 week, May 27th.
Oh.
Next week.
Yeah,
It's next
Yeah.
week.
It's next,
Oh.
it's just on there as a
Oh,
placeholder.
it could be-
6 days.
Because we had
this
changed the
meeting.
date,
Yeah.
so I have one on June 10th, Tuesday, June 10th.
So to be determined, Desi will determine what our next planning meeting is. So, we have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Yeah, just before we go into that, can we get a, you know,
I have to go
good
talk to
faith
my
effort?
board member.
Just as long as everyone's having conversations and getting together and having conversations, is that something that we could say that there will be one more meeting between the two towns before we meet at this June 10th? Is that something that in good faith we both would?
We discussed this last Monday night, we are open to further discussions, so.
Is that something you can say with talking and whatever, that you could have at least one more meeting before maybe?
I'll talk to my other board member.
Okay, all right, thank you. Second,
Okay, so all those in favor?
aye,
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we're adjourned 7:11.
thank you, gentlemen. And ladies. Is it-
No pressure.